Hari Om, Namasarvebhyah. Welcome to the sixth session in the series of Samskrita Vyakarane Pratyayaha. In today's class, we will talk about the next pratyaya in the sequence, namely the stri-pratyaya. Let us start with the Mangalacharanam. Varnanam Arthasanghanam Rasanam Chandasamapi Mangalanam च कर्तारो वन्दे वाणी विनायकौ येनाक्षर समाम्नायम् अधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. Let us quickly revise the list of pratyayas and what we have accomplished so far. So there are around 800 different words in Sanskrit which are commonly referred as pratyaya in Sanskrit Vyakarana. They are of 8 types, out of which we studied the sup pratyayas, ting pratyayas, vikarana pratyayas, and over the last 2 classes, sanadi pratyayas completely. 4 different remaining types of pratyayas are pending. And today we are going to take the 5th one in the list, stri-pratyayaha. There are a total of 10 stri-pratyayas. Let us see, let's try to finish the study of the stri-pratyayas in details in today's class. Now, as we all know, stri-pratyayas are added to pratipadiks and they will give another pratipadik. So this is a kind of pratyaya that will take a pratipadik to a different pratipadika. The only difference is in the linga, in the gender. The meaning doesn't change. So for example, you have say bala and you add a certain stri pratyaya and it becomes bala, which is for all practical purposes same as bala except for a gender change. Linga is different. Therefore, before talking about stri pratyayaha, it is important that we understand this particular concept of lingam and how does it enable us to attach and appropriate stri pratyaya in Vyakarana Shastra. So let us start with the concept of lingam and let us get the most obvious things out of the way immediately so that we can actually focus on the things that matter. So what is a lingam? In dictionary, the meaning of the word lingam is chinnham, an indicator. So on the bodies of animals, there are certain indicatory organs. By looking at these organs, the organisms, the animals, even the plants can be classified into pullinga, that is puman, strilinga, that is stri, and napumsakalinga, that is napumsakam. These 3 lingas, these 3 categories are created using specialized organs present on the bodies of animals. There are a lot of verses that will discuss these points in details. So I have collected 2 of them over here. Pumstvam tu laukikam medhravatvam stritvam sayonita ayogya indriya yogitvam klibatvam avadharyatam. Self-explanatory. It says that there are these specific genital organs on the bodies of a man and a woman that will indicate that specific gender, and absence of those functionalities is the third gender, which is kleba. Kleba means napumsakalinga. That's where klaibyam masma gamav partha prayoga comes. Another such verse, stanakeshavati stri syat lomashaha purushaha smrutaha. Lomashaha is the hairs on the mouth, beard, mustache, and so on. Ubhayoho antaram yatcha, different than these two, yat tadabhave napumsakam. Abhave, if none of these characteristics are applicable, it is napumsakam. So this way, there are many different verses that you can find in literature that will give an exact definition of lingam in a laukika sense. Laukika means the one that is seen in the society, the one that is seen in the loka. That is the laukika linga. The interesting point is that such kind of Laukika linga is not really useful in Vyakarana Shastra. Why it is not useful in Vyakarana Shastra? There are two fundamental reasons behind it. First, the prayogas in the language, even for animals like, say, humans, man, woman, and so on, the prayogas in the language do not directly match the linga that the loka associates with them. A very common and well-known example is the word patni, which is in the strilinga, daraha, which is in the pullinga and nitya bahuvachananta word. So dara is the pullinga pratipadika, but it has to be used in the bahuvachanam only. And kalatram, which is in the napumsakalinga. All these three words mean exactly the same thing. And in the loka, in the society, the particular object that is indicated by these three words is always and only associated with the strilinga, with the feminine form. But what do we see in the language? You have a feminine word, you have a masculine word, and you have a napumsaka word for exactly the same object. And not just that, you can even create beautiful sentences. Ramasya daraha maithili kularatnam. Daraha pullinga word, maithili strilinga word, kularatnam napumsakalinga word. Everything indicating one and the same object. Therefore, what is the conclusion? The gender of the object does not necessarily match the gender of the pratipadikam, the gender of the word that is used in the language for indicating that object. This is just one of the problems. The second and a bigger problem is that this particular definition, pumstvam tu laukikam or stanakeshavati and so on, is only for animals. Maybe you can find some similar organ level differences in plants, microorganisms and so on, but it is still limited to living entities, chetana padarthaha. When you go to non-living entities, achetana padarthaha, there are absolutely no such markers. If you take a book, if you take a bottle, if you take sun, moon, earth, what are the markers that will say that the corresponding object is purusha or stri or napumsaka? There are absolutely no markers on the object, but the words, the pratipadikas corresponding to these objects have a definite linga in the language. Agnihi, used in pullinga. Khatva, a cot, used in strilinga. Vari, used in napumsakalinga. So the first thing that I said, let's get the obvious one out of the way at the beginning of the class, is exactly this. The concept of gender that we have in our minds associated with the objects has very little to do with the concept of the gender in actual language in the Vyakarana Shastra. So now the most important question that comes up in front of us is, in the Vyakarana Shastra, how is the gender determined? Whether it could be the gender of objects or whether it could be the gender of the words that represent these objects. But how is this gender determined? And the answer is going to surprise you. So much of thought has gone into this particular process. The Vyakarana Shastra relies on the Siddhanta in the Sankhya for getting an answer. In the Sankhya Shastra, the Siddhanta says that there is a Purusha and the Prakriti, and this entire universe is made from this Prakriti using three gunaha: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Rajas and Tamas are Sakaranta words, Sattva is Akaranta word. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, these qualities mix with each other in different proportions. In fact, each one of us, every object in the universe has a specific percentage or has a specific combination of sattvam, rajaha, and tamaha. And therefore, this sattvam, rajaha, and tamaha, it in a way forms a unique fingerprint of that object, and it is this fingerprint that the Vyakarana Shastra exploits, and it uses the relative proportion or relative interaction of sattvam, rajaha, and tamaha to determine the genders of the object and of the pratipadikas. Let us directly look at the verse. I'm going to explain this verse line by line, but let me read it first. Sankhya prasiddha sattvadehe lingam parinatirmatam tatropacheya bhago yaha tatpumstvam abhidhiyate स्त्रीत्वं त्वपचयो भागः साम्यं क्लीबत्वमुच्यते केवलं शास्त्रकार्यार्थम् आश्रितं शाब्दिकैर्बुधैः. Some of you might have understood parts and pieces of this particular verse, but let's go line by line. Sankhya prasiddha. These particular gunas, which one? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are specifically well known in the Sankhya philosophy. So, Sankhya prasiddha sattvadehe parinatihi, the result of the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas qualities that we pick up, borrow from the Sankhya Shastra, is the concept of linga in Vyakarana Shastra. And now, how is this concept determined? Pay close attention. The Vyakarnas say that every object has a certain amount of sattva, certain amount of rajas, and certain amount of tamas, and this proportion is not fixed. Every moment it changes. That's why sometimes when we are lazy, when we are asleep, the tamas quality is high. When we are doing some activity, the rajas quality is high. When we are meditating, when we are calm, happy, sattva quality is high. So every moment to moment, these qualities differ. The proportion of these qualities differ from each other. Their interaction differs from what it was in the previous moment. Now, this is the interaction between the sattva, rajas, and tamas that the Vyakarnas, the Shabdikas, the grammarians use this kind of interaction to define the terms pumstvam, pullinga, stritvam, strilinga, and klibatvam, napumsakalinga. But before I explain how these terms are defined, let us look at this last line, which is very crucial, and I have written it in the bold font. Kevalam shastra karyartham ashritam shabdikair budhaihi. So what I am going to tell you right now is a pure theoretical concept. It is not backed by any experiment or any drishti or any Veda or any pramana. It is not drishya, it is not based on anumana and so on. It is purely a theoretical concept. Like for example, in physics, chemistry and so on, there are models of atoms and molecules that are built up. These are theoretical concepts that explain you what the underlying structure could be. In exactly the same way, these are purely theoretical concepts. And then how are these pumstvam, stritvam, and napumsakatvam defined? The shloka itself says it, but let's look at it in details. Tatra upachaya bhagaha yaha tat pumstvam abhidhiyate. I'll give you an analogy so that you can explain. Take an example of a ghee lamp. So there is a ghee in it, there may be some cotton thread in it, and there is that flame glowing. And because of various factors, sometimes the flame glows with more intensity and there is more light around you. So it is a combined interaction of these three components: the rate of burning, the cotton, the ghee, and some other, the surface area of that lamp, and so on. So multiple components interact together in a complex way, but the result is that sometimes it may be even the wind coming from window, but sometimes the flame becomes more bright and you see a little bit of more light. The same lamp, sometimes the flame becomes dim, it becomes small, and then there is a little less light. Sometimes the flame is very steady and the light is also not changing, the intensity is not changing. Exactly on the in this way, the Vyakarana Shastra says that in a complex interaction between sattva, raja, and tama, if these three qualities as a single unit appear to be spreading, appear to be more expressive, appear to be more specifically moving away from each other. So, upachayaha, avirbhavaha, vruddhihi, prithak prasavaha. You can say expanding, you can say spreading. If such a quality is observed, then you say it is pullinga. Now, when I say observed, it is all hypothetical. Nobody is observing these qualities. As I mentioned, kevalam shastra karyartham shabdikaihi ashritam. So, if in a certain object you want to express or you want to say there is a pullingatva, there is a pumstva in that object, the way Shastra explains it is that there are these qualities called sattva, rajas, and tamas, which as a together effect seem to be spreading or seem to be expanding in some way or the other. Exactly the reverse. The same three qualities, if they are condensing, if they are coming together, coagulating, so apachayaha, samstyanam, kshatihi, rasaha, then the corresponding object is considered a feminine form or stritvam. Let me repeat this. This is all hypothetical. So the way to look at it is actually reverse. If there is an object in the feminine form, the way Shastra justifies it is by saying that there is some kind of coagulation, some kind of condensation of the three qualities. Similarly, if there is a pumstvam that has to be justified, then there is some kind of spreading, expansion, more specific expression of these three qualities. And finally, when it is in a steady state, it is neither spreading nor coagulating. This is called napumsakatvam. This is the napumsaka gender. And therefore, Vyakarana Shastra defines linga as lingatvam prakruta gunagata dharmaha. Let us understand this. Prakruta comes from Prakruti. Prakruta guna, the gunas of the Prakriti. That is the Sattvam, Rajaha, and Tamaha. Prakruta guna gatavastha. Gama is to move. Avastha. An avastha, a state generated because of the relative motion of the gunas of the Prakriti. That dharma, that quality is lingatvam. So the Shastra, Vyakarana Shastra, defines the lingam of the objects as the interaction between the three gunas, the pumstvam, stritvam, and napumsakatvam, in form of spreading or coagulation or just the existence. And this kind of linga nirdharanam, this kind of determination of gender, not by looking at the physical characteristics of the object, but by looking at the relative interaction between sattvam, rajaha, and tamaha, is purely for the shastra karya. On the next slide, I'm going to show the need of that. But purely for the shastra karya, You cannot have some antardhyanam or divya drushti or shabda pramana or anumana and so on. None of these can be really used to justify it. It is not like Vedas where somebody realized those things in their dhyanam. It is just a theory that has been presented so that some concepts in Vyakarana Shastra can be very cleverly and clearly defined. So let us now ask a question. Why create such a complicated system? Why have this Sattvam, Rajaha, Tamaha, their interaction? Why to have so much complicated stuff? Why not just randomly assign lingas based on the usage? So for the linga, why do you take the resort of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas? And the answer is that if you use the simpler approach, like just assign the lingam to the object, then you cannot justify cases where the same object can be determined, can be represented using words in multiple genders. So if you take wife, which is an object, patni, in that particular object or for that particular object, you want to justify daraha, which is a pullinga word. You want to justify vadhuhu, which is a strilinga word. You want to justify kalatram, which is a napumsakalinga word. And now, with this complex concept of sattva, rajas, and tamas, the way Vyakarana Shastra defines it is that Vyakarana Shastra says that in any object, sattvam, rajas, and tamas are never steady, never in the fixed proportion. Their interaction is always happening, their relative importance, their relative expression is always changing, and therefore when that particular expression, the result is expansion, there will be, or we can assume that there is some situation where the result is the spreading of the three gunas, and that particular state is represented by the pullinga word in the language called dara. Similarly, let us visualize. It's all a let us, because eventually you have to justify the linga of the words used in the language. So similarly, let us visualize the coagulation of the three gunas, and that particular state can be represented by the feminine word vadhu. And similarly, let us imagine, let us visualize a situation where there is neither spreading nor coagulation, and we can use the word kalatram to justify that particular state. The word is in the napumsakalinga. Therefore, look at this particular paragraph. I'm going to read some words in this paragraph and explain it. So, patni ityeva padarthe gunatrayasya upachayasya vivaksham krutva. It is all hypothetical. So vivaksha, you imagine that the three gunas are going away, they are expanding, and that imagination is what leads to the justification of the pullinga dar word. Similarly, gunatrayasya samstyanasya vivaksham krutva. You imagine the three gunas are condensing, and that takes you to the feminine word vadhu. And similarly, sthitimatrasya vivaksham krutva. So all based on imagination. Some of you might not appreciate it. Some of you might be thinking this is utter nonsense. But believe me, Vyakarana itself is all imagination. We never say Vyakarana is reality. All supratyas, ting pratyas, tadhita pratyas, krudanta pratyas, everything is imagination. It is eventually the language that is in the reality. The Prakriti and Pratyaya combining together to form the word is all imaginary concept. So entire Vyakarana is based on imagination. So there is no harm or there is nothing weird or random in saying that this particular concept is also based on imagination. Vivaksha, intention of speaking something. If you have the intention of justifying a pullinga, you imagine the three gunas expanding. If you have an intention of speaking the feminine form or justifying the feminine form, imagine that the gunas are coming together. There is a lot more to this. There are some books where this particular concept is significantly explained in details, but for now, I think this much part is enough. There is one more question that I'll take and then I'll go to the chat box. So, the one question that might have come to your mind is that we are actually going in a cyclic loop over here. So, for example, in order to justify the word daraha as a pullinga, we are imagining that the qualities are spreading. But if I just look at the word dara, how would I know that these qualities are actually spreading and so that I justify the pullinga? Similarly, if I just look at the word kalatra, we are imagining that the qualities are in a steady state. But how do I really understand that the qualities are in the steady state so that I can derive the kalatram word in an apumsaka form? So all this theory is correct. But the question is, how in reality, in practice, while speaking, writing the language, how do I understand whether a certain pratipadikam is pullinga, whether a certain pratipadikam is strilinga, or whether a certain pratipadikam is napumsakalinga? So the answer to your surprise is what Bhashyakara says, lingam ashishyam lokashrayatvat lingasya. Ashishyam means need not be told. This word comes from shas verb. Shas anushasanam, to tell something with an authority. That's why Vyakarana Shastra is called Shabdanushasana. It tells you about the Shabdas in the authority. So Shasa, this particular verb, it gives the word Ashishya. Lingam Ashishyam. The gender need not be told. Why? Lokashrayatvat. It is the loka, it is the shishta prayoga, it is the society that you have to observe and then understand that a certain word, say dara, is in pullinga bahuvachanam, vadhu is in strilinga, kalatra is in napumsakalinga. How that knowledge is obtained? There are no sutras in Ashtadhyayi or any other Vyakarana for this kind of knowledge. This particular knowledge is obtained by observing the language, by learning the language, by looking at the shishtas. So, lingasya lokashrayatvat. The gender of a particular word is dependent on the usage in the language, is dependent on how the scholars, how the experts, the shishtas use those words. So you use that, you learn from that particular usage and learn what the linga of a given word is. It need not be told, purely for the Shastra purposes, purely for associating the genders of non-living entities, and purely for associating or justifying the cases where a wife, which is actually a feminine person, can be represented with multiple words. Purely because of this hypothetical requirements, the concept of sattva, raja, and tama has been introduced in the Vyakarana Shastra. Let me take the question over here. So the concept of spreading, coagulation, and equality is only for Vyakarana Shastra. You have understood it correctly. Yes. What is the use of such vivaksha of spreading and coagulation is not understood. As I mentioned, the vivaksha is to answer the questions that are on the previous slide. So two fundamental questions that are there. If a object, a person, wife is in the feminine form in the physical object format, then why there are different gender words in the language? We see the wife is only one example. There are other examples as well. You take a say star, the taraka. So there is taraka, there is nakshatram, there is pushyaha. Similar words with different shades of meaning in different genders. So why is different genders in the language? Why are there words with different genders in the language for an object which has the same gender in the real loka in the world? So that is one question for say patni, daraha, kalatram. And the second question is how is the gender of inanimate objects in the language agnihi, khatwa, vari determined? So Bhashyakara has a very simple take on this. As I mentioned, Bhashyakara says lingam ashishyam loka lingasya. Bhashyakara basically sidelines this question and he says, look at what Shishtas are using and use that. But that's not the real answer. The Vyakarana Shastra needs to give a real answer. It can be hypothetical, but it has to be some way of coming up to a concrete answer of why Vrikshaha is in the Pullinga, Agnihi is in the Pullinga. What is a hypothetical answer for that? The answer for that is the interaction between the three gunas. Let's move ahead. So we have seen basically how the interaction between sattva, rajas and tamas on in the Vyakarana Shastra lets us determine, even hypothetically, that's okay, but the linga of a pratipadika. Let us now focus on this concept of linga of the pratipadika. In the language, we see some pratipadikas used in only a specific lingam. So, for example, there are pratipadikas that are used in the pullinga alone, like vriksha, muni, pitru, marut. These are used in the pullinga alone. These are called niyata pullinga pratipadikani. Now, how do we justify that? The corresponding object, say a tree object, we only visualize the three gunas expanding and therefore the corresponding word vriksha is only in the pullinga. This is how the Shastra is going to tell us for every word. We are not going to talk the same thing again and again, but this is how the Shastra tells us for every word. We have to keep that in the back of our mind. So all these are niyata pullinga pratipadikas. Similarly, buddhi, lakshmi, matru, sarit, they are always in the strilinga because the objects will have or we visualize the three gunas coming together. So these are niyata strilinga pratipadikani. Phala, vari, madhu, jagat, these are niyata napumsakalinga pratipadikani. So this is actually the simplest category of the pratipadikas where some pratipadikas are purely in the pullinga. Some pratipadikas are purely in the strilinga. Some pratipadikas are purely in the napumsakalinga. A little more complex category is the set of pratipadikas where the object is the same but the words are in the different linga. So there is the same object called patni, but you have a word in the pullinga, dara. You have the word in the strilinga, vadhu. You have the word in the napumsakalinga, kalatra. So in this particular example is the single padartha, but multiple pratipadikas. Each of the pratipadika is niyata linga. So how is this different than the previous one? In the previous one, we imagine a fixed state where there is an expansion or contraction or just the sthiti. Whereas here, for the same object, the wife, in one time we are going to imagine the expansion of the gunas, letting us define the word, the pullinga on the word dara. In the same object, we are going to define the contraction of the gunas, allowing us to define the feminine word vadhu. And on the same object, we are going to imagine a steady interaction or steady state of the gunas, allowing us to define the napumsakalinga on the kalatra. But this is a small category. The major category of the words in the language are the words which can be expressed in multiple genders. Same word. So, tatta. Tatta means bank of a river. So, tatta is a word which can be expressed in all the three genders in the language. Same word. Please understand this. In the previous two examples, it was not the same word that was expressed in all the three genders. In this particular third set of examples, it is the same word called tata, which is used in all the three genders. Another example, the word mrityu, death, is used in pullinga as well as strilinga. Saha mrityuhu, sa mrityuhu, both are acceptable. Daman, a rope. This is used in strilinga and in napumsakalinga. So not in pullinga, but strilinga and napumsakalinga. Some of you might have read or heard, studied the prayoga from Meghadutam. Adye baddha viraha divase yashikha dama hitva. So that's dama usage in the napumsakalinga, but the word can also be used in strilinga. Divas is used in pullinga and napumsakalinga. Somebody is writing a comment, Visheshanas. So yes, Guru, Laghu, Sarvanama words, Tad, Etad, numeric words, Eka, Dvi, Tri, all these same set of words can be used in three lingas. This is where the complications arise, and that is where the stri-pratyayas come in the picture. So understand, let's step back and understand what we have seen so far. Objects sometimes have markers on their bodies, but that's the most simplest definition. We sidelined it immediately within 2 minutes of starting the class. Then we said there are these qualities called sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are purely hypothetical in the sense the interaction is considered hypothetical. The spreading is the pumstva, the coagulation is the stritva, and just the existence is napumsakatva. Then we said, why are such create qualities being taken help of? It is in order to justify the different pratipadikas in different lingas for the same object. And now we are going one step ahead and saying that sometimes it is the same pratipadika, not even a different pratipadika. So same pratipadika, sometimes in the feminine form, sometimes in the masculine form, sometimes in the napumsaka form. And now what do? Obviously, you resort to this concept of spreading of gunas and coagulation of gunas and so on. But even if you do that, just by looking at the pratipadikam tata, how will you understand whether it is a feminine pratipadikam or masculine pratipadikam? And that is where the stri-pratyayaha enter our discussion. So the stri-pratyayaha are crucial for this last set of pratipadikas, where it is exactly the same pratipadikam which is used in multiple genders. So when you have a pratipadikam which has two or more lingas, then in order to clearly express the femininity which was imagined in that object. So you have a river, you have a bank of the river, and hypothetically we imagine a femininity in this bank of the river by considering the contraction of the sattva, rajas, and tamas gunas. And this particular femininity, which is now being imagined in the bank of river, needs to be expressed in words. For the previous category of pratipadikas, that was not the problem. The vadhu word itself was ukaranta feminine. Kalatra, it was napumsaka. We don't need a separate marker for napumsakas. The dara akaranta, therefore automatically it becomes pullinga. But in this particular case, it is the same word tata. But now there is an imagined stritva, imagined femininity over here, and that needs to be expressed. That is where the stri-pratyayas come in the picture. So tata is a pratipadikam that runs in all the three genders. When you have a desire of expressing the femininity, mark my words, femininity is not being newly added. Femininity is imagined in the object itself because it is the sattva, rajas, and tamas which are coming together in that object. Therefore, the femininity is imagined in the object. Now we just have to express that. The decision has already been made. Now the decision has to be shown. So in order to indicate Dyotana, just to indicate a property that is already existing in the object, in order to indicate that femininity, we use a pratyaya called Nipa, defined in the Vyakarana Shastra. This is a stri-pratyaya. You add Nipa on tata to create a pratipadikam called tati. Tati is exactly tata, absolutely no difference, just that the Nipa pratyaya is physically expressing the concept of the coagulation of the three gunas. Let us take another example. If you take Bala, this is the word that can be used in Strilinga as well as Pullinga. How do we know it? Again, from the loka, from the usage. So this is the word that can be used in Strilinga as well as Pullinga. So when there is an imagination of Stritva, imagination in the sense there is a person, a girl is there, and you imagine the concept of the three gunas coming together in order to express that particular concept, in order to express that particular femininity, you add a tap pratyaya on the word bala to create bala, which is a feminine stri pratyayanta word, feminine word, in having the pratyaya tap indicating the femininity. So what is the takeaway message over here? These pratyayas like tapa, nipa, they do not indicate any new meaning. They are dyotaka pratyayas. The femininity is in the object because the sattva, raja, tamas gunas are in the object. So femininity is in the object. It is purely being expressed. And what kind of pratipadikas will get these stri pratyaya? It is not as simple as we want to express femininity, so apply the stri pratyaya. If the word itself is purely feminine, like matru, then you don't express, then you don't need a stri pratyaya over there. If the words belong to the third category on the previous slide, is the same word used in multiple genders, and if there is a confusion, then you apply the three pratyayas. Therefore, all these slides you have to study them in sequence. Unless you learn what is taught earlier, you cannot go ahead. First, you have to understand that there is a concept of the three lingas. Let's go. Somebody is asking. Let's go to the previous slide. So first there is a concept of three lingas. Concept of three lingas. These are mapped to the sattva, rajas, and tamas. Then we are saying that there are different words indicating the same object, but these are niyatalinga words. That is not a problem. But if there is a same word, tata, daman, divasa, mrityu, which is used in the feminine form along with something else. So divasa is not a right example in our context because pullinga and napumsakalinga is not in the scope. But strilinga napumsaka, pullinga strilinga, all the three lingas and so on. So in order to indicate the femininity of the on the object, where with help of a word which is kind of same in all three genders, you take the help of stri pratyayaha and you add those to create words like tati or bala and so on. Let's take this one last line and then I'll take a question. So therefore, if it is a niyatalinga pratipadika like Lakshmi or say Buddhi or say Matru, Jagat and so on, you don't apply stri pratyayas. So stri pratyayas are not to be applied sarvatra everywhere. They are only to be applied in specific cases where it is the same pratipadika that the shishtas, that the loka uses in more than one gender. So it's the same object, same word, but now an extra coagulation of the three elements is to be indicated. There is a question. Once you had mentioned that there is a subtle difference between Dyotaka and Swarthika. So can these also be called Swarthika Pratyayas? If no, then what is the difference? Can you clarify, please? Let's hold on this question. I will talk about this question, the point when we go to the Tadhita Pratyayas. Because Swarthika Pratyayas are the ones that don't even indicate anything. They are just like simple uh, fragments that are attached for no reason just because such a word exists. Whereas Dyotaka Pratyayas are the ones that actually indicate something. So Sup Pratyayas that we have seen were Dyotaka Pratyayas, the stri-pratyayas that we have seen that are Dyotaka Pratyayas. There is one example that I mentioned, Bala versus Balaka. There is a Kana Pratyaya, Ka or Kana, either is fine. There is a Ka or Kana Pratyaya. Now this ka or kana pratyay is not doing anything. It is not even indicating the meaning of bala, because the meaning of bala is indicated by bala itself. So then it is like an absolute empty pratyaya that goes and sits over there. That kind of pratyaya is purely swarthik, which is not dyotaka. This is a very high advanced discussion. In general, it is classified as dyotaka. But if you really want to drill down, then this is not a dyotaka because it is not indicating anything. It is a swarthika pratyaya. So that's the difference between Swarthika and Dyotaka. But again, I did mention it, but it is a little advanced topic. We'll probably talk about it in case of Tadhitas. For now, they are actually indicating the femininity. So they are indeed the Dyotaka Pratyayaha. Any further questions? If not, this was the theory so far. Now, please make sure that you have understood the three lingas, pullinga, strilinga, napumsakalinga, three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, their interaction coming together, spreading and so on. This all being hypothetical, but with the real practical examples of determining the gender in the of the pratipadika, and more importantly, determining when a stri pratyaya should be added. A few questions over here. How do we identify such words? Are there a list of words used in both the lingas where we can apply the strilinga pratyaya? So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Obviously, there are many such infinite words that can be used in multiple lingas, and that's why the entire stri pratyaya prakaranam is given by Panini. But I'll also show a pointer on the website. If you don't know yet, there is a Linganushasanam in the right menu. If you go to Linganushasanam, you can see that the Linganushasanam involves different sutras. This is not Ashtadhyayi sutras, new set of sutras that are that give the linga of certain words. So there is a striadhikara. So words in the strilinga form are being discussed in this particular entire set of sutras. Then there is pullinga adhikara. Words in the pullinga are being described. If you go a little bit below, there is a napumsakadhikara. Then there is a pum napumsakadhikara, the pullinga and the napumsakalinga together, strilinga and pullinga together, and so on. So different adhikaras are there. Towards the end, you have a vishishta lingam. So all the three lingas, the words in all the three lingas are also listed over here. There are many more questions over here, so let's take them one by one. So we are using the Sankhya Shastra to define the lingas. So the word wife, which has various synonyms in different lingas, is used because of Sankhya definition. So if Sankhya has said Dadaha was a neuter gender, we would have to just accept it, or was there some logic to it? No, no, this is a thorough confusion that you have. Sankhya Shastra is not dictating the genders of anything. Sankhya Shastra is not playing any role over here. We are just borrowing the concepts called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas from Sankhya Shastra. Sankhya Shastra reference is actually irrelevant. We are using the concepts of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Where are they defined? They are defined in Sankhya Shastra, but that's completely irrelevant. A simple example is in Ashtadhyayi. Some of you might have studied a little bit of sutras and so on. There are words like Vruddhi, or there is a word like Guna. It is imported from the language. But the Vruddhi in Ashtadhyayi has nothing to do with Vruddhi in the language. Guna, same thing. Nadi, same thing. So we are just importing the words from Sankhya Shastra without anything. The gender is actually decided by the Vyakarana Shastra itself by looking at the Prayoga. So it's actually a reverse thing that you look at the Prayoga. Oh, Tatta is used in three genders. How do I justify that? Let's talk about the coagulation and the expansion and the sthiti of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. That's how Vyakarana Shastra defines it. Those of you are interested, I'll give you the references. I don't have the names, but I'll give you the references later on in the group. If you're interested, there are dedicated granthas, only 100 verses for this particular topic. We just, those of you are interested can study them. Very few people study them. It's not really in the mainstream, but if you're interested, you can try. Which Shastra gives these parallels of Sankhya Vyakarana? I don't understand this question. This is all Vyakarana Shastra. Parallels means what? There is no linga defined in Sankhya Shastra. The concept of tata being in three lingas and so on is not in the Sankhya Shastra. It's just the three words, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, indicating the qualities are being imported from Sankhya Shastra. I hope I'm making myself clear. If not, feel free to ask questions and I'm happy to answer. This is mostly theory. Now what we are going to have in the rest of the class is just bombardment of rules. As somebody was saying, how do I identify such words? So I'm giving you those words that what words will get one pratyaya, what words will get other pratyaya and so on. So please share in group the 100 verses. No, I don't have the 100 verses. I'll just share the name of the book. Feel free to purchase it. Feel free to download it from so whatever and so on. So I'll just share the, I don't know if it's 100 or 200 or whatever. It's just the book that talks about, it's called Linga Vachana Vicharaha. Take it down. There's no need to share also. It's called Linga Vachana Vicharaha. It's a Sanskrit book with a Sanskrit commentary, and I think there is a Hindi commentary on the top of it. It's a while I looked at this book. It's called Linga Vachana Vicharaha. There's just two sections. One section talks about the genders and it will talk about what I taught today. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas is just the tip of the iceberg. It will go in significant details. It will say Aropitam Pumstvam, Aropitam Stritvam and so on. Very beautiful concepts are elaborated. And then there is a Vachana Vicharaha also over there. But my genuine advice is don't go in those things unless you have mastered the basics of grammar that we are going to discuss over here. Okay, any further comments? If not, let us go to the list of the 10 stri-pratyayas, and that's where the complications now start. Because what I discussed so far is just pure plain theory. Sometimes, and this theory is basically developed so as to justify the prayogas. All these hypothetical things, imagination and so on is developed so that prayogas can be justified. So eventually it comes to the prayogas, and that's what we are going to discuss on this particular slide. And as you will see, the prayogas don't directly align with the theory. There is always a pinch of salt problem. The theory is to be taken by and large representing the prayogas, but at the end of the day, it is the prayogas, it is the actual sutras that matter. So let's start with the list of the stri-pratyayas. There are 10 stri-pratyayas in Sanskrit grammar. And as I mentioned, always mention, when there is a lesser number of pratyayas, you need to memorize it completely. So there are 10 stri-pratyayas in Sanskrit grammar, very beautifully grouped. Tap, dap, chap, 3 pratyayas. Nipa, nisha, nina, 3 more. So that becomes a 6. Groups of 3, very easy to remember. Tap, dap, chap, neep, nish, neen. Then there is a pratyay called ung. Then there is a pratyay called ti. Then there is a pratyay called shf. And finally, there is a pratyay called shyang. So 6 pratyayas, very easy to remember. And then there are 4 pratyayas that are little difficult. Ung, ti, shp, and shyang. And then you have tap, dap, chap, neem, gish, keen. Now, before I really tell what each pratyaya is and how to be used and so on, I want to be very clear over here. The mapping of pratipadikas with these pratyayas, which pratipadika should get which pratyaya and so on, is extremely complex. One of the most complex and convoluted topics, stri-pratyayas, extremely involved mapping. Here are some examples of those quirks. If a word is used in a samasa, there is a different pratyaya. If a word is used without samasa, there is different pratyaya. So daman means rope. If you want to just use the word daman in the feminine form, you add a dap pratyaya on daman. Now for last time I am telling, What this conceptually translate is that there will be a rope object, there will be three gunas, and they are going to come together, and that's the fact we want to express in words. That is what you have to believe, understand at the back of your mind. For the rest of the class, I will not be talking that again. So you have daman for indicating the femininity. Stri dyotana, you add a dapa pratyaya to get dama. But same daman, if it is in the samasa, dvidaman, you add a different pratyaya called neep to create a altogether different word. So it is not as simple as take a pratipadikam and add a pratyaya. Even a minor change in that pratipadikam will give a different pratyaya. There are some pratipadikas where you have a choice. So dvi plus purusha, dvau purushau pramanam asyaha. The length of something, say a river, is 2 man height. Dvau purushau pramanam asyaha. 6 feet, 5 feet. So 10 feet, for example, 11 feet, like that. So in order to determine that, you use the word dvi purusha and you have a choice. You can add a neep or you can add a tap. Two different words are created. In some very complex cases, two stri-pratyayas have to be added one after another. So gargya, you add one stri-pratyaya called shpha, not shpha. Gargya shpha, and another pratyaya, and another pratyaya called nish. So you first add a shpha, and then you add a nish, and then you get the word called gargyayani. In some cases, absolutely no stri-pratyaya. So mrityu is a word which is used as it is in the pullinga and as it is in the strilinga. So you just don't use any pratyayas. In some cases, optional pratyayas. If you use the word guru, big, long, large, huge, you can use it as it is in the Strilinga. Guruhu Nadi. Acceptable and perfectly correct format. Or you can add a niche pratyay to form gurvi. I don't remember if it is neep or niche, one of them. See, I also don't remember. So complex stuff. Gurvi, which also means the same thing, large. So Gurvi Nadi or Guru Nadi. In the Chanda Shastra, there is this Chanda called Vidyunmala. If anybody of you remembers the Lakshana of Vidyunmala, मौनम ध्यानम भूमौ शय्या गुर्वी तस्या कामावस्था मेघोत्संगे नृत्यासक्ता यस्मिन काले विद्युन्माला. So gurvi is the word used over there, indicating large, indicating big. So the reason I wrote this slide is basically to show you that there are really complex rules of adding stri pratyayas, and therefore what we are going to do on the remaining slides is just take some sample examples, sample classes. Classes is groups, categories of the words, and I will show you when tap pratyaya is to be added, when dap is to be added, when chap is to be added, and so on. So in all these pratyayas, what I'm going to show you today is just a tip of the iceberg. There are going to be loose threads. It is acceptable. If you don't understand something, that's okay. Just pay attention to what I'm teaching. And for those specific categories where I'm teaching the pratyaya, make sure that you understand those. Now there is a question over here. Will you please explain the concept of Pumad Bhava and Bhashita Pumska? So Pumad Bhava is something that we will discuss in case of Tadhita Pratyayas if time permits. Pumad Bhava is a little bit complex concept, so and it is relevant in case of Tadhitas. So maybe we'll take this question in case of Tadhitas. I don't want to mix in the three Pratyayas. Bhashita Pumska is a specific type of word which is used in Pullinga and Strilinga or Pullinga and Napumsakalinga. Is as simple as that. So Pullinga and Strilinga. So I think on 3 slides before, look at this. Some words are used in Pullinga and Strilinga, or some words are used in Pullinga and Napumsakalinga. Bhashita Pumska is a name which is given for such kind of words. So Bhashita Pumska words have a special role in the Prakriya. We are not studying Prakriya, so I'll not go in the details, but they have special role in the Prakriya. Some specific different type of sutras work over there, and therefore this particular term is coined. It has nothing to do with the stri-pratyaya prakaranam. Does it make any difference in the meaning? No. So Dvipurusha versus Dvipurushi. So correct. That's what I said. That does not make any difference in the meaning. The meaning on the left hand side, Dvau Purushau Pramanam Asyaha, is the same as Dvipurushi, Dvipurusha, and so on. I searched in Google but not getting the book. It should be available in archive, but if not Google, it might be available in some of your local bookshops. So Linga Vachana Vicharaha is the name. I'll confirm it later on if it is different, but why it is not in Google, hard for me to tell. Okay. Any further questions, comments? There is one question that I kind of missed because it scrolled up. Uh, Why are three words giving the same result? Ta, pada, cha, all will give akara only, right? Same with ikara. Let's talk about it. So I was not going to talk about it if the question wouldn't have come, but now the question has come. Let's talk about it. But before that, let's actually see where that akara is the same akara coming up. So anubandhas in the stri-pratyayas, tap, dap, and chap. In the three stri-pratyayas, ta, pa, da, cha, all are anubandhas. In the prayoga, you only get an akara. Everything else disappears. So that's tap, dap, chap. And bala plus tap becomes bala. Seaman plus Dap becomes Seema. Kausalya plus Chap becomes Kausalya. So you add, these are examples where you are adding one pratyaya each. Now obviously the question somebody asked, why three different pratyayas? The answer is very simple. There is a difference in the form. When you are adding tapa, you are just writing extra akara over there. When you're adding dap, you're actually removing the nakara and adding an akara over there. When you're adding chap, even though it seems that you are simply adding an akara over there, that akara is different in the pronunciation. Some of you, or probably most of you, should be aware of the concepts called Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. The Vedas, for example, are recited in these particular intonations. So adding a chap pratyaya, adding a tap pratyaya gives a different intonation, gives a different combination of Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. Now, in the normal writing or in simple Laukika Sanskritam, you will not probably understand or appreciate it. But in the Vedas, or specifically at the time when the grammar was created, when in the language of Panini Maharshi's time, those differences were very common even in the spoken language. And therefore, Panini Maharshi had to create a separate pratyaya called chapa to explain that particular udatta swara that comes in the word Kausalya, whereas such an udatta swara is absent in bala, and therefore different pratyayas have been created. Same is the reason for the next three. Neep, nish, neen. There is a difference in the udatta anudatta pronunciation. When you learn Stri Pratyaya Prakaranam in details, or more importantly, Tadhita Pratyayas in details, you will learn more about the exact swaras, Udatta, Anudatta, that Pakara gives, or Nakara gives, or Chakara gives. So these letters, these encoded letters are actually used to give certain swaras in the final word, which are different than other cases. So Deva plus Neep becomes Devi. There is a Neepa Pratyaya, Nga, Pa, Sha, Na, or all Anubandha, only E is heard. Hamsa plus Nisha becomes Hamsi. Brahmana plus Neena becomes Brahmani. There is a small difference in all these in the pronunciation. The next word is ung, next pratyaya. Ung, nga is the anubandha over here. The U is the only thing that is heard. Kuru, which is a Rasva Ukara, plus U becomes Kuru. A stri in the Kuru family is Kuru with a Dirgha Ukara. The next pratyaya is a Ti pratyaya. No anubandha. Ti is her as it is. U1 plus Ti is Yuvati. So Yuvati is derived from Ti pratyaya. Please make a note. The words like Mati, Gati, Shakti, Yukti, they end with T, but they have nothing to do with the stri-pratyayas. There is no stri-pratyaya in Mati and Gati and so on. Why? Go back to the basics. You do not want to express, or there is no imagination of the three gunas going to get separated away from each other. That's how Vyakarana Shastra imagined it. The reality is that these words are only used in the feminine form. So when a word is used in multiple genders, you have to distinguish. So yuvan, that particular word can have the feminine qualities as per the Shastra, and therefore the ti pratyay is added to distinguish the original masculine qualities. That's not the case with mati, gati, yukti, and so on. And therefore, these are not the ti pratyanta words. They are krudantas. We will learn them in the one of the upcoming classes. Then the next pratyaya is a shyang. Again, sh and ng are anubandhas. Ya is heard. Kumudagandha becomes kaumudagandhya. Next is sth. Sh is the anubandha. Ph is heard. Ph is converted to ayana. Somebody was asking the question in the last class. Ayana is what the ph gets converted to. Gargya plus ph becomes gargyayani. Ayana is added over there. So this is the general list of 10 pratyayas. Tab, dap, chap, nip, nishgin, ung, ti, shyang, and shph. These are the pratyayas that we are going to discuss now in today's class. What we are going to do actually is we are going to spend 90% of the remaining time. I think 1 hour is remaining. 90% of that time we are going to spend on the nipa pratyaya. Neep is the most important pratyaya in the stri prakaranam. So we are going to spend maximum amount of time on the neep pratyaya, and then we are going to spend a little time on all other pratyayas. The most important, the most commonly used pratyaya, most versatile pratyaya in the stri prakaranam is the nipa pratyaya. Maximum number of sutras are on this pratyaya. Therefore, it is this pratyaya that we will focus on. There is a question over here. How do we call a stri guru? Can we call it gurvi? Technically, it is correct to call it gurvi. The word is not very much used in the practice. Guru is okay. As I mentioned, the guru word itself is used in the feminine form. So you can say just the word guru and there will not be a grammatical error. And gurvi is also correct, but it's not used in the language in that way. Okay, so let us now begin. These stri-pratyaya pratipadikas can get other lingas also, but mati will be in strilinga only. No, I think what you mean is that the original word can be in multiple lingas. Stri-pratyanta word cannot get other lingas. So for example, Kausalya cannot be in the pullinga form. Kausalya has to be in the strilinga form. The point is Kausalya is generated from Kausalya using a pratyaya, which is a stri pratyaya. So the Kausalya object internally has a femininity which is being expressed using the chap pratyaya. But in case of mati, there is an inherent femininity which is expressed right there by the ktin pratyaya. Therefore, there is no need of a separate stri pratyaya. We'll learn about it when we go to the Kridanta Prakaranam. You can keep the mati and other words aside if it is confusing you. I'll wait for say 30 more seconds if there are any questions. If not, let us now actually start talking about all the pratyayas. As I mentioned, I will go in the sequence. So on this single slide, we will cover tapadap chap pratyayas. Then there are 5, 6, 7 slides, I think, for the neep pratyaya. And then in 2 slides, we will cover all the remaining pratyayas. So that's our goal. So let us start. Let us start with the first 3 pratyayas. All of them have the visible form drishya rupam as a. So we have tap, dap, chap. The tap pratyaya is the default choice for all the rasva akaranta words where a femininity is to be expressed. So if you have a rasva akaranta word, bala, aja, if you have any rasva akaranta word where a femininity is to be expressed, so don't consider words like vriksha. Why? Because the vriksha word doesn't exist in the stri form, feminine form. It is a niyata linga word. Remember a few slides ago earlier, niyata linga word. So we are not talking about such words. We are not talking about all Rasvakaranta words. Only those Rasvakaranta words where a stri quality is expressed in the language or it is to be expressed. We use the tapa pratyaya as a default. Utsarga. Utsarga means that there will be other pratyayas, namely neep will be there, niche will be there, chap will be there, and so on. There will be other pratyayas which will override the tap. But if no pratyaya overrides the tap, and if the femininity is to be expressed, we will use tap. So tap is our default choice for rasva akaranta words. Rama plus tap, Krishna plus tap, Eka plus tap, Prathama plus tap, Dvitiya plus tap, Tritiya plus tap, Chaturtha plus, and then somebody else will override it. So we will say Chaturthi. Neep is going to override that. Therefore, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Neep is going to override that tap. But in any case where there is no overriding and you want to express the femininity and the pratipadikam is Rasva Akaranta, the choice is tap. That's how Panini Maharshi gives the tap pratyaya. Let's go to the next one. Now we are going to talk about the dapa pratyaya. Any word which ends in the man component. So for example, seaman. Seaman means Sima Resha, the boundary. Paman, it's the name of a skin disease. Daman, a rope, a thread, many other words. So if a word ends in mana and the femininity needs to be expressed. So Atman also ends in mana, but Atman is Niyatalinga Pratipadikam. You can go to Linganushasana and see that it is a Niyatalinga Pratipadikam. If it is a Niyatalinga, femininity doesn't need to be explicitly expressed using a stri-pratyaya. So words like Atman and so on are to be excluded. Or Naman, for example, is particularly a Napumsakalinga word. So this has to be ignored. But words where there is multiple lingas possible, if it ends in mana, you will add a dapa pratyaya. That dapa pratyaya in the prakriya gets rid of the nakara and adds an akara. So seaman becomes a seema, paman becomes pama, and so on. And this dapa is only given optionally, vikalpena. You can use the original word also in strilinga. So you can say seaman, you can say paman or daman in the strilinga, or you can add the dapa pratyaya, say seema, pama, and so on. So this is about the dapa pratyaya. And the third pratyaya, chapa pratyaya, this pratyaya is added on certain type of tadhita words. So as I mentioned, rules are complex and this is just a start. There are going to be more complex rules down the line. This is going to look a little bit daunting, but as I mentioned, this is one of the most complex topics in Sanskrit grammar. Complex in the sense because the rules have been so interwoven with each other. So, example over here, if there is a tadhita pratyayanta word which has a special tadhita pratyaya called yang. So, y, ch, ch, j, j, y, that last letter y, half, followed by yakara and followed by ng, k, kh, g, g, ng. So, that is the ngakara. So, if you have a tadhitanta pratipadika where a yang pratyaya is attached. So, there is an original pratipadika called kosala. Then you add a yang tadhita pratyaya to get a pratipadika called kausalya. Then you can add a chapa pratyaya on that pratipadika to get kausalya. So Kausalya is the daughter of Kausalya. Kausalya is the king of Kosala. So yang pratyaya is added in the meaning of king, Swami, Raja, Adhipati, and then chap is added in meaning of daughter or feminine form. So daughter is not the meaning being expressed, is basically the feminine form of Kausalya. And then another example, Suvira. Suvira plus yang becomes Sauvirya. This is again a yang pratyayanta word and you add a chapa pratyaya. So you see the complexity now. In order to understand chapa pratyaya properly, you need to understand what a yang pratyaya is. Yang is one of the 400 pratyayas or 500 tadhita pratyayas. So when you will learn 500 tadhita pratyayas and at what time you will learn yang in that particular series and then you come to the stri-prakaranam and learn chap properly. That's where the complexity is actually increasing or it multiplies. So for the yang pratyayanta words, you add chap on the top of them. That's how tap, dap, chap, three pratyayas are defined in Sanskrit grammar. That completes the discussion of tap, dap, chap. And now we will go to the most important part of today's class. This is the practical stuff that is now going to start. So till now, there was all theory and tap, dap, chap and so on. It's just like initial, just getting started, tip of iceberg. The real practical knowledge is starting with this slide, the ni pratyaya. Before that, there is a question over here. Mati, bhakti, yukti. These are all niyatalinga pratipadikas. That's correct. These are all stri-linga pratipadikas. Niyata stri-linga pratipadikas. We will learn about them in the Kridanta class. I don't know whether I'll have time to teach those. Kridanta is so vast that two classes are not sufficient. Let's see. I'll try to touch this topic a little bit in the one of the two classes. Anyway, Neep Pratyaya is the next Pratyaya in the series. Neep, as I mentioned, is the most versatile Pratyaya. It is attached in many different cases and simple ones. Not like complex ones like there must be this Tadhita Pratyaya and that and so on. One or two cases are there here and there, but they are also very simple. You will come to know as we see the examples. So the first, the Neep Pratyaya is added to the Rukaranta words. What Rukaranta words? Not like Pitru and Matru. Pitru is Niyatalinga, always masculine. Matru is Niyatalinga, always feminine. But through Truch Pratyayanta words which are generated using the verbs. So for example, Datru, Dhatru, Hartru, Hantru, Naptru, or even the words like Patitru, Hasitru, and so on. So all Rukaranta words get a Neep Pratyaya. So Datru becomes Datri, Hartru becomes Hartri, Naptri, Hantri. Now this is the practical knowledge. So if you now come across any Rukaranta word and if you have to use a feminine form of it, you now for sure know that there is a rule in Sanskrit grammar which allows adding a Neep Pratyaya on the Rukaranta words. So here is an example. Sarva Sankata Hantri Tvam is a praise for goddess. Kartri Mangala Shreyasam Datri Sarva Vidyanam Jagat Dhatri Tathaivacha. And as I mentioned, Niyatalinga Pratipadikas are to be excluded from today's entire class. So Pitru is Niyata Pullinga, Bhratru is Niyata Pullinga, Matru, Nanandu, Swasru are Niyata Strilinga. They are all to be ignored. So that is the first rule. Rukaranta Pratipadikas get a Neep Pratyaya. The next rule is Nakaranta Pratipadikas get a Neep Pratyaya. So Rajan is a Nakaranta Pratipadika, Radni, Dandin, Dandini, Swamin, Swamini. So anytime you have a Nakaranta Pratipadika, you get a Nipa Pratyaya. And obviously, remember the exception. We already talked about mana. So mana is already nakaranta, like si mana. But there specifically dapa pratyay was told. So that has to be excluded. So if the pratipadikam ends in mana, then there will be a dapa pratyaya in general. And otherwise, there will be neep pratyaya. So Rajan becomes Radni, Dandin becomes Dandini, and so on. Somebody is asking Kartru, Karta, Kartri, Vakta, Vaktri. So Kartru is the Pratipadikam. There I understand the confusion. The Pratipadikam, let's take the example of Datru or Kartru. The Pratipadikam is Kartru. The Prathama Ekvachan in the Subanta table when the Su Pratyaya is added is Karta. So Karta is not the Pratipadikam. It is the Kartru which is the Pratipadikam. In the feminine case, you add a neep pratyaya and you get kartri, which is again a pratipadikam in the feminine case. There you add a su pratyaya and you get the same form back, kartri, but that kartri is now a subanta. So karta versus kartri is the subanta pullinga versus subanta strilinga. Whereas kartru versus kartri is pratipadikam pullinga versus pratipadikam strilinga. And same thing for vakta, vaktri. So vaktru becomes vakta and vaktru becomes vaktri, which will become vaktri. That is how you have to understand for all words. The second point was nakaranta words. So Rajan becomes Radni. So Rajana. There is a nipa pratyaya and akara goes away because of some prakriya. So j plus na is nya, nya. Na becomes nya. J plus nya is nya. So eventually the form is Radni, but there is a nip pratyaya. That is the point to be understood. Dandin becomes Dandini. Swamin becomes Swamini, and so on. So here is a verse from, I think, Lalita Sahasranama. Ashtamurti Rajajetri Lokayatra Vidhayini Ekakini Bhuma Rupa Nirdvaita Dvaitvarjida. So Ekakini, Ekakin plus Neep. Vidhayin plus Neep. So Nakaranta words get a Neep Pratyaya. If there is something that you should memorize from today's class, it is these slides starting here or starting the previous one. Akaranta words by default get tap. Mana, anantava, mana ending words get a dap. A specific tadhita pratyaya will cause a chap. That is a specific thing, so that you can ignore if you want. But these are more important. Rukaranta words get a neep. Nakaranta words get a neep. Next, very interesting property. If there is a word which is generated using a pratyaya with ukara as the anubandha. So there is an original pratipadikam, a pratyaya was added, that pratyaya had ukara as the anubandha, and a new pratipadikam is created. This pratipadikam, when you want to convert it into the feminine form, you will add a neepa. Let us take examples. This is more common than you believe. So the most famous example or easily accessible example, ktavatu. It has ukara as anubandha. Patha plus ktavatu becomes pathavata. That's your pratipadikam. In Pullinga, it will become pathitavata. What I'm writing here? Pathitavata. Patha plus ktavatu becomes Pathitavat. In Pullinga, it will become Pathitavan, but that is the Prathama Ekvachana form. Patha plus tavatu, the Pratipatikam is Pathitavat. On that, if you want to show femininity, express the stritva, you add a nipa pratyaya, Pathitavati. In the same way, Krutavati, Gatavati, Dattavati, and so on. So never forget, if it is an Ukara Anubandha, example was Tavatu, it will be E. That is Neep Pratyaya. Another example, there are so many pratyayas with Ukara as the Anubandha. Kvasu is the pratyaya. Famous word Vidvas is generated using Kvasu. Vida plus Kvasu becomes Vidvas. The feminine form is Vidoshi. There are additional transformations, but what you have to understand is Ikara comes, Vidushi. Similarly, Se Divas, a little less known Pratipadikas, Se Divas, Shushruvas becomes Se Divasi, Shushruvasi, and so on. Third example, Davatu. The very well-known word Bhavat is created using the Davatu Pratyaya. So Bhavat in the feminine form will be Bhavati. Bhavati katham asti. So why Bhavati? Because there is the Bhavat word which was created using the Davatu Pratyaya containing the U as the Anubandha. So you get the Nipa Pratyaya. So by looking at Pathitavata, it may not be immediately obvious that there is an U Pratyaya. So you have to trace back the derivation of Pathitavata. How was Pathitavata derived? Using Patha and Tavatu. And then the bell rings. Oh, there is an Ukara Anubandha, which means Pathitavat has been generated using Anubandha Ukara, which means Neep will be added. So an Anubandha in the previous step of the Prakriya causes a Neep in the next step of the Prakriya. Another example, very well known Tadhita Pratyaya, Matupa. There is an Ukara Anubandha. Therefore, Buddhimata becomes Buddhimati. Vidyavata. Even if you hear Vata, it is Matupa Pratyaya. Vidyavati. Shaktimati. So simple prayogas which you take for granted are now actually starting to unfold in front of you with a proper Shastra background. Never forget these rules. Vatupa. There is a different pratyay called Vatupa, not the one in Vidyavati and so on. There is a Vatupa pratyay used to indicate the comparison of measurements. So Yavat, Tavat, Etavat, Kiyat, Iyat. These are the words that are generated using Vatupa pratyaya. So Yavati, Yavati Shaktihi Matsakashe Vartate. Whatever power I have. Yavati Matihi. Iyati, Kiyati. So Kiyat becomes Kiyati, Iyat becomes Iyati, and so on. Next pratyaya, Iyasun, very commonly used. Gariyas becomes Gariyasi. Shreyas becomes Shreyasi. Preyas becomes Preyasi. So Iyasun pratyaya. It becomes Dirgha Ikara, Neep pratyaya is added. So in these cases, the U Anubandha causes an addition of a Neep pratyaya. There is a question over here. Sumedhas pratipadikam. The pratipadikam prathama ekvachanam is a sumedhaha. What will be the feminine form? I do not recollect, but I don't think there will be a feminine form, or maybe, but I don't recollect, to be honest, and there will not be feminine form. Every word need not have a stri-pratyaya, as I mentioned. You can just use sumedhaha. But now that you have asked, let us actually go to the kosha and see if there is a Sumedhas word in the kosha. Where is the kosha English? It's the word itself is in the Strilinga form according to Vachaspatyam. So this word itself is Sushtu Medha Asyaha. So as I mentioned, there is no Stri form to be added, stri pratyay to be added. And it can be used in pulling also. So no need of any stri pratyaya because it is as it is, like mrutyu, for example, used as it is in the feminine form. But this question actually raises an important alarm that, as you can see, Sumedhas looks like Gariyas and Shreyas and so on, but it is not Iyasun Pratyay. So what you apply for Gariyas or Shreyas cannot be blindly applied for Sumedhas. Every Pratipadikam will have a quirk, one or the other quirk, and there will be some rule in the Stri Pratyay Prakaranam. Just 80 rules, I think 75 to 80 rules, but still a lot of information is packed in those. Anyway, that was the second or third rule about the Ni Pratyaya. Let us recollect. The first was the Rukaranta words. The second was Nakaranta words. The third is the words with Rasva Ukara as the Anubandha in their generation, like Pathitavat and so on. The next is a similar rule, but again very powerful. A word which is generated using a pratyaya having takara as the anubandha. So instead of ukara, now I am giving the examples of takara as the anubandha. Lyut pratyaya, lekhana becomes lekhani. See, well-known forms are now revealing themselves. Pachani, Karani, Bharani. Now you see the brilliance of Panini Maharshi. Why did he add a takara in that Lyutta Pratyaya? It was an encryption of or indication of the fact that down the line there will be a neep pratyaya. So lut pratyaya, lekhana becomes lekhani. There is a ta pratyaya in the krudanta prakaranam. Karma kara becomes karma kari. Bhikshachara becomes bhikshachari. Yashaskara becomes yashaskari. So ta pratyaya, the takara in that pratyaya is anubandha. It was added because he envisioned a dirgha ikara, neep pratyaya in the stri form. Another pratyaya, some pratyayas are probably not known to you. Taka pratyaya is there. Somebody is writing mayata, so mayata pratyaya is there. Manomaya becomes manomayi. Jalamaya becomes jalamayi. So now we can go back to your books and look at what pratyaya had a ta in it, and immediately you know why that ta was added by Panini Maharshi. Tula pratyaya. The pratyay is not known to you probably, but the forms are very well known. Adyatana, that is the tula pratyaya. All these are tadhita pratyaya. So tula is a tadhita pratyaya, mayat is a tadhita pratyaya, tak, ta, and tak and lut are krut pratyayas. So adyatana becomes adyatani, adyatani kaksha, shwastani, yastani, sayantani, and so on. Data pratyaya. This is a Purana pratyaya, counting numbers. So Purana pratyaya. So Panchana plus Data becomes Panchama. That's why Panchami. So Prathama, Dvitiya, Tritiya, because there is no Takara Anubandha. But suddenly from Chaturtha onwards, 4 onwards, the Pratyaya is Datta, which has a Takara in it. So Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, and so on. Somebody is saying, is it Bhate, Bha plus Dava? It should be Bha plus Davatu. Did I write Bhu plus Davatu in the one of the previous slides? The question was the Bhavat word in the previous slide. Was it Bhu plus Davatu? No, Bha plus Davatu. So the form is correct. Bha plus Davatu Bhavat. That is correct. Bhater Davatu is the sutram. So Bha verb gets the Davatu pratyaya. Bhater Davatu. I can show it to you. I mean, see, the website is more powerful than you can think and learn. I'm not advertising it because it's mine, but learn how to use it. Just search for Bhavat over here. Maybe Bhavan or Bhavat. Now we have to try out, but Bhavat, not Vaiyakam Siddhanta Kaumudi, in the Unadi part. Where is Unadi part over here? Bhavan, maybe. See, Bhater davatuhu. So davatu pratyaya. You can find answers to yourself by looking into either kosha or going onto dictionary. This going on the website. This has enormous amount of material. It takes time and experience to learn how to use this. But this is a very powerful tool. Anyway, I was talking about the ta pratyaya tula, data pratyaya. So purna pratyanta words, panchama, panchami, chaturthi, shashti, saptami, ashtami, and so on. Touch is a pratyaya used in the samasa. So Maharaja becomes Maharaji, Paramaraji, Krishna Sakhi, and so on. So anytime you come across a pratyaya that has an anubandha called takara, you now know why the takara was kept by Maharshi. Next one. There is a tadhita pratyaya called, there is a pratyaya called ana. It's a very versatile pratyaya. It is used in the tadhita prakaranam. More than 100 or 150 sutras in tadhita prakaranam are for this pratyaya itself. And it is also used in the krut prakaranam. So it is a krut pratyaya as well as it is a tadhita pratyaya. As well as means not the same pratyaya. It is like two devadattas in your class. One stays in one colony, other stays in other colony like that, but there is a same sequence of letters a and n, which is a tadhita pratyaya as well as a krit pratyaya, and any pratipadikam which is generated using ana pratyaya gets the neep in the feminine form. So kumbham karoti, somebody who creates a kumbha. Kumbha plus kru plus ana becomes kumbhakara. So that's the ana pratyaya. Kumbhakara plus neep, kumbhakari. So ana pratyaya is generated in, is used in kumbhakara. So kumbha plus kru plus ana. Ana has to be there. So kumbhakara, kumbhakari. Similarly, sutrakari. Sutram karoti sa sutrakari. Indra asya devata. So a Shakti or something whose god is Indra. So Indra plus Ana. That Ana is important. It will give Aindra. And then you add a Neep to create Aindri. So Aindri Shakti. The Indra's power is Aindri. That's the Neepa Pratyaya. Maghi Paurnima. Magha gets an ana to form Magha plus Neep. Maghi Paurnima. Vyakranam adhite sa Vaiyakarani. So Vyakrana plus ana gives Vaiyakarana. Neep gives Vaiyakarani. So anytime you have ana in the system of derivation, and a masculine form is created. So Kumbhakara, Indra, Magha, Vaiyakarana, all these are pulling forms. They are added, you have to add a Neep Pratyaya on the top of it to create the feminine form. Kumuda becomes Kaumudi, Siddhanta Kaumudi. Kumuda plus Ana becomes Kaumuda plus Neep Kaumudi. Mithila plus Ana becomes Maithila plus Neep Maithili. Somebody has already given an example. Janaki. Janaka plus Ana becomes Janaka. Janaki. Rakshasi. Rakshas plus Ana. Rakshasa becomes Rakshasi. And so on. Somebody is asking a question, is a Samradni or a Maharadni incorrect forms? Obviously, they are correct. They are derived in a different way. So, Maharadni is basically you first create a Radni word. Rajan plus Neep becomes Radni. And then you add the Maha on the top of it. Mahati cha iyam Radni. But if you take Maharaj and add a Neep Pratyay on the top of it, so that lady may not be great, but she is the wife of Maharaja. So that will be Maharaji. Whereas here it is the lady who is a king and great. So Maharadni. Similarly, Samradni and so on. So these are different ways of deriving these words. That's what I'm saying. It's not a simple topic. I never said that the topic was complex when it came to Subanta Prakaranam, Tiganta Prakaranam, even Sanadi Prakaranam. But this is a very convoluted topic. One minor thing you move here and there, and the pratyaya changes, the concept changes, and so on. Anyway, let's move ahead. There are a bunch of other pratyayas. Now, I'm not going to discuss all of these, but we talked about some pratyayas like ana, tit pratyayas, takara, itsamya, takara, anubandha, lut, and so on. Ukaraha, anubandha, tavatu, and so on. There are a bunch of other pratyayas. Panini Maharshi just lists them. If you see ay pratyaya, if you see taya pratyaya, if you see thak, thai, kai, kwarap, yai pratyaya, add a ni. It's as simple as that. So these are some of the examples. The video will be available. Go through them later on if you want. I'll just walk through one or two. So pruthivi plus anya. There is an anya pratyaya. Parthiva plus ni parthivi. Say videhasya patyam. Videha plus anya. Vaideha becomes vaidehi. Loka plus thanya. There is a thanya pratyaya over here. Laukika becomes laukiki. Nasha plus kwarapa. Kwarapa pratyay is over here. Nashvara, nashvari, and so on. So understand that in order to learn which stri pratyaya has to be added, you need to have a proper understanding of other types of pratyayas like the aya pratyaya, taya pratyaya, thaka pratyaya, and so on. So somebody is giving vainateya, dhak becomes vainateyi. So that's correct. So vainateyi, and so on. So that is the another set of pratyas where a neat is added. Let us take two more important topics. Probably need probably 5 or 10 more minutes beyond the stipulated time, but let's finish this entire presentation. Dvigu samas, whatever pratipadikam is generated by the Dvigu samas, and if it is akaranta, you use it in strilinga and you add the stri pratyaya called ni. So Dvigu samas, which is akaranta, trayanam lokanam samaharaha. So the three lok is an akaranta word, but it is not to be used in the pullinga. You always add a neep on the top of it. So Dvigu samas, if it is akaranta, it has to be used in the strilinga and you add a neep pratyaya. So triloki. अष्टानाम अध्यायानाम समाहारः अष्ट प्लस अध्याय प्लस नीप अष्टाध्यायी त्रयाणाम पादानाम समाहारः त्रि प्लस पाद प्लस नीप त्रिपादी सप्ताध्यायी and so on. So anytime you have a dvigu samas akaranta pratipadikam, you add a neep pratyaya. The last topic that I want to talk in the neep pratyaya is the most important, shatru pratyaya. If you have the pratipadikam generated using shatru pratyaya, you add a neep on the top of it and sometimes you add a nakara. So patha plus shatru becomes a pathata. And then you add a neep along with a nakara to form pathanti. Pathanti is the pratipadikam. All the 21 forms will be like this. Pathanti, pathantyo, pathantyaha, pathantim, pathantyo, pathantihi. Everywhere you will hear a nakara because that nakara is generated while creating the pratipadikam itself. So you add a shatru pratyaya on patha, and when the neep pratyaya is to be added, a nakara is inserted. But in some cases, the nakara is not inserted. Kru plus shatru becomes kurvat. The nakara is not inserted. You just get kurvati. So only kurvati. So kurvati, kurvatyau, kurvatyaha. No nakara is heard. In some cases, nakara is optional. Likha plus shatru becomes likhata. You add a neep pratyaya and you get two forms, likhati and likhanti. So likhati, likhatyau, likhatyaha and likhanti, likhantyau, likhantyaha. So you have 21 forms without nakara and 21 forms with nakara. So what I am going to talk right now is I'm going to give you an exact rule. Many of you might know it, but it's worth telling. I'm going to give you an exact rule where the nakara will come and where the nakara will not come and where the nakara will come optionally. This is very, very important topic. Even if you forget everything in today's class, I mean, I don't want you to forget, but even if you forget everything in today's class, this next slide is what you should never forget. Shatru pratyayanta forms where they will get a nakara in the feminine pratipadika and where there will be no nakara in the feminine pratipadika. The rules have to be memorized. They are actually very simple. You just have to look at the gana and you have to look at the last letter of the dhatu, and then it will tell you whether the nakara is compulsorily added, whether the nakara is optionally added, or whether the nakara is not added. So the rule goes as follows. Let us see when the nakara is compulsorily added. If a verb belongs to first gana, fourth gana, or 10th gana, then nakara is compulsory added. Simple, very simple. The rules are extremely simple, but remember these. So bhavanti, charanti. Bhavanti is the bhavat shatru pratyaya. So bhu plus shatru pratyaya. I think there was the confusion for somebody earlier. Bhu plus shatru pratyaya becomes bhavat. That is different than the davatu pratyaya bhavat that we were talking. Bhavan katham asti. That bhavan is different. This becomes bhavan. Being, the state of being is bhavan. So bhu plus shatru, there when you add a nipa pratyaya, because bhu is in the first gana, you will add the nakar compulsorily. So bhavanti. That other bhu, that is that other bhavat becomes bhavati. But here it is bhavanti, charanti, pathanti. These are all the examples of first gana. Nrityanti, fourth gana. Divyanti, fourth gana. Chorayanti, chintayanti, 10th gana. So if a word is in the first gana, fourth gana, 10th gana, there will be compulsory na while nip is being added. Then all the Atideshika verbs except for one handful of them, but whatever we learned in the previous class, Nicha, Sana, Yanga, Kyacha, Kamyach, Kyasha, Yaka, Aya, Iyang, Ring, lots of them, except Quip. Quip is what I did not write over here. So except Quip, most of them, I might have missed one or two, all these Atideshika verbs, their Shatru Pratyanta form will get a Nakara. So a verb has to be either atideshika, or if it is from the dhatu patha, then 1, 4, 10. That's where you get the compulsory nakara. Pipatishanti, putrakamyanti, gopayanti, lohitayanti, and so on. Somebody is asking for kyanga. Kyanga is not in this list because kyanga only gives dhatus that are atmanepadi, whereas shatru pratyaya is only used in parasmai pada. So good observation. There is a reason why kyang is not there because shatru cannot be added on kyanga. Similarly, ringa should also be not there. Shatru cannot be added on ringa. Ringa is also Atmanepadi. So let me remove Ringa and let me remove Kamayanti also. Kamayanti is not correct. Ringa is not correct. But most of the other, I might have missed one or two, but if it is Atmanepadam, obviously there will not be Shatru Pratyaya. So that's compulsory Nakara. Optional Nakara. Vikalpa. Verbs of the sixth Gana. Likhati or Likhanti. Tudati or Tudanti. Ichhati or Ichhanti. Verbs of the sixth Gana. Akaranta verbs of the second Gana. Remember, Antima Varna, last letter also needs to be seen somewhere. So, Akaranta verbs of the second Gana, only handful of them. Yati or Yanti. Snati or Snanti. In the website, you have enough tools to find out such words. So, go to the Dhatu Patha, use the filters, Select Adadi Gana, that is the second Gana. Select the Adi Varna. So Adi Varna is Akara, sorry, Antima Varna, Akaranta words. So Antima Varna is Akaranta. That's the filter that we apply. You see 15 verbs. Go back to the filters and add Parasmai Pada because it is only the Shatru Pratyaya or Ubhaya Pada is fine. So then you have the words Ya, Yati or Yanti, Vati or Vanti, Bhati or Bhanti, like that. So this is how you can find the Akaranta dhatus of the second Gana. And the Shatru Pratyay, which is used in the Bhavishyat Kala also. Those of you who don't know, we will learn about it in the Krut Prakriya class. Sorry, in the Krut Pratyay class. I'm promising so much for Krut Pratyas, I don't know what all I'm going to teach. But Patishyati versus Patishyanti. Dasyati versus Dasyanti. Pathayishyati. This is Nich Pratyaya plus Bhavishyat Kal. Pathayishyanti and so on. So if there is a Shatru Pratyay in the Bhavishyat Kala, whichever Gana it is, you don't have to worry. Whichever Dhatu it is always going to be optional Nakara. If it is a sixth Gana, optional Nakara. If it is the Akaranta verb of the second Gana, optional Nakara. And in all other cases, no Nakara. So Shrunavati, Dadati, Kurvati, Janati, and so on, there is no Nakara. So this is an important slide. This is very practical. You will need it while writing your answers or while writing your sentences, essays, and so on. Remember, where there is a nakara, where there is an optional nakara, and when there is no nakara, watch the videos. It is important to watch the videos again to catch up the missed bits. So don't think that once you attend the class, you have understood everything. I myself never believe that when I attend any classes. You always need some kind of revision, some kind of getting back to that material to reaffirm your understanding. Anyway, so eventually that takes us to the next pratyaya in the sequence, niche. We spend a lot of time on the niche pratyaya. We have some 8-10 minutes. I'll probably take 5 more minutes, but we will finish all other pratyayas. So let us, without any delay, let us go to the niche pratyaya. Now, this is the place where more and more complexity is going to increase. Some weird rules are going to be written on the slide. You have to bear with me. So, niche pratyaya. In the the niche pratyaya is used for specific words indicating a jati. Jati means a species, a clan, a group. So Brahmana, Kshatriya, and so on are jatis, but at the same time, doctor, engineer, lawyer is also jati. A jati is a group that has a certain characteristics, certain common characteristics. So specific jati vachaka word, specific. There is some more details about it in the sutras, but we'll not go in them. So kukkuta, the animal, the specific bird. Vrushala, a bull. Hamsa, another specific bird. Mayura, peacock, and so on. So these words get a niche in the feminine form. Kukkuti, Vrushali, Hamsi, Mayuri, and so on. It is not a neep pratyaya, it is a niche pratyaya. If it would have been neep, the form would be same, but ucharanam would be different. The udatta anudatta combinations would be different. Sadly, we don't know these in the sense we don't practice these in the language today. So the difference has almost minimized in the spoken Sanskritam, but in the Vedas the difference indeed exists. So we adhere to the pratyayas at least to create theoretically the correct forms. So Mayuri is a niche pratyayanta form. Similarly, Hamsi and so on. The second rule is in the Bahuvrihi Samasa, if you have avayava vachaka words like Chandraha iva mukham, Shurpani iva kararuhaha, Shobhanaha keshaha. So if you have avayava vachak words in a Bahuvrihi Samasa, then you can either add a niche or you can add a tap optionally. So some examples. Chandraha iva mukham asyaha can be Chandramukhi, where you're adding a niche pratyaya, or can be Chandramukha, where you're adding a ta pratyaya. Shobhanaha keshaha asyaha. It can be Sukeshi or Sukesha. So there is a bahuvrihi samasa and there is an avayavavachaka word in the Uttarapada. Mukha, Kesha or Oshtha. Bimbam iva Oshtau asyaha sa bimboshthi or bimboshtha. You can either apply a tap or you can apply a niche. Shubhani angani asyaha shubhangi or shubhanga. So well-known words, now we understand their derivation. Special samasa is there. Shurpani iva kararuhaha asyaha. Kararuha is nails, nakha. So Shurpani iva kararuhaha asyaha. You can get the word Shurpanakhi or Shurpanakha. So one of them is the name of the Rakshasi, but other is also a general word. Both of them are correct. Shurpanakha, there is a nakara. Shurpanakhi, there is no nakara. So there are additional rules that are playing over here. But the basic rule, you can either apply a niche or you can apply a tap to create Shurpanakhi or Shurpanakha. So when there is an avayavavachaka word, you get either a niche or a tap. The next rule. For certain akaranta words, in order to indicate a stri in the relation, it can be wife, it can be daughter, it can be sister. For certain specific words, I'm actually purposely being vague because there is more discussion over here which I don't want to enter. But for certain specific type of words, there will be niche pratyaya. Some examples are ganakasya patini, ganaki. So if there is a ganaka, a counter, say accountant, and his wife, that is ganaki. So sambandhini stri. That wife may not know anything about the numbers, but she is the wife of the ganaka. In Marathi, for example, there are these very well-known words like doctorina. Now she is just the wife of doctor. She may not have the medical knowledge, but savakarina, doctorina, karabharina. So that is an equivalent over here. So ganaki is just the wife of a ganaka. The one who herself counts, that is ganika. That's an altogether a different derivation. Tap pratyay is being used over here. So see what kind of complexity I was talking about. Look at a lady. If she is actually counting, she is ganika. If she is wife of a counter, she is ganaki. So this is the level of details that Panini Maharshi goes into. Gopasya stri becomes gopi. Gopa is the one who protects cows. So gopasya stri, that becomes gopi. But a female who will protect a cow is gopa. So again, there is a difference. Yamasya stri, the sister of Yama is called Yami. The daughter of Kaikeya is called Kaikeyi. So specific situations, the niche pratyaya is given. And when such a niche pratyaya is given, there is an agama, an an particle inserted in some words. So same pratyaya, but an extra particle gets inserted. Indrani. So that's the Indrasya stri. Bhavani. Bhava is Rudra, Shankara. Tasya stri. Bhavani. Matulani, Acharyani. So in all these cases, the feminine word is only representing the relationship with the masculine word. See how fine level thinking is there. So Acharyani is not the female teacher. It is the wife of the male teacher. If it was a female teacher, she would be Acharya. But the wife of a male teacher is Acharyani. That's what I was saying. Doctor versus doctorine difference. So Acharyani, Matulani, Kshatriyani. Kshatriya's wife is Kshatriyani. The female form of Kshatriya is Kshatriya. So in this way, the niche pratyaya is used to indicate a female in a relation or in reference to a relation being expressed with a male. Last slide, or maybe second last slide of today's class. The remaining pratyas, I'm just going to go with an express train. Neen, oong, and ti. Three different pratyayas. Specific words get these neen pratyaya. So nara becomes nari. Brahmana becomes brahmani. Gautama becomes Gautami. So again, these are jatis. Gautama, Gotra, Brahmana, the jati, Nara, species. So jati is a group of entities, people, or group of padarthas having a certain specific characteristics. So Nari, Brahmani, Gautami, in these cases, there is a neen pratyay. Neen pratyay. In some ukaranta pratipadikas, there is ong pratyaya. So kuru plus ong becomes kuru. Veerabandhu plus ong becomes veerabandhu. Chanchu plus ong becomes chanchu. So here it is the same word. Chanchu also means a beak. Dirgha ukaranta chanchu also means a beak. The ung pratyay does not really add any value over here, but this is the true swarthik pratyaya. It doesn't add any meaning over here, but still the raswa and dirgha form are both available. Viraha bandhavaha or bandhavaha or viraha bandhu asyaha. So a lady whose brothers are warriors, that is vira bandhu. Dirgha ukara is used. Kuru vamshasya stri. Kuru. So that's dirgha ukara is used over here. Karkandhu, the word exists with a Hrasso Ukara as well as Dirgha Ukara. It is name of a fruit. So Karkandhu is the another example. Somebody is asking, is it Acharyani or Acharyani? I missed talking about that. So it is indeed Acharyani. There is no Anakara over here. There is a separate rule for that, but this is not a typing mistake. Thank you for catching. It is actually Acharyani only. Brahma Bandhu. Somebody is giving an example of Brahma Bandhu that comes in the same case of Veera Bandhu. So Veera Bandhu plus Ung is Veera Bandhu. Brahma Bandhu plus Ung is Brahma Bandhu. Correct. So same sutra gives that particular example also. Karkandhu is a fruit, can be used in both the Rasvokaranta and Dirghokaranta forms. So that's about the Ung Pratyaya. The next Pratyaya in the sequence is a Ti Pratyaya. Only one Pratipadikam, Yuvan, gets the Ti Pratyaya, giving the word Yuvati. So in the entire Ashtadhyayi, a single sutram has been created for giving a Ti Pratyaya for exactly one word in the ocean of the words, namely Yuvan. As I mentioned, Mati, Gati, and so on are not Ti Pratyayanta words. I mean, there is a Ti Pratyaya, but that's an altogether different Ti Pratyaya. It is a Ktin Pratyaya in the Krudanta Prakaranam. The Ti Pratyaya, which is in the series of these 10 Pratyayas, is only added to one word, Yuvan, a teen or an young adult, and then Ti becomes Yuvati, young female adult. Iti arthaha. So that completes Neen, Ong, and Ti. And finally, the most convoluted two pratyayas, Shpha and Shyanga. Shpha pratyaya is added to certain tadhitanta words. So very specific set of tadhita pratyayanta words like gargya or gargya gets a shpha pratyaya, or vatsa, it should be vatsya. Vatsya gets, let's fix this. Vatsya, so gargya is a tadhita pratyayanta word that gets a shpha. Vatsya is a tadhita pratyayanta word that gets a shpha. And after shpha, you always add a nish. That's a rule. So you have a shpha and you must add a nish after shpha. So gargyayani, vatsyayani, and so on. And the last pratyaya, Shang pratyaya, is even more complex. It is very closely related to the Tadhita prakriya. So what happens is, in the Tadhita process, there is a special pratyaya, in the tadhita process. The tadhita pratyaya gets converted to shang pratyaya. So it is a conversion from a tadhita pratyaya. Till now, what we were seeing is that there is a pratyaya and a stri pratyaya is added on the top of it. Right now, there is a very unique example. The shang pratyaya, the last pratyaya, the most complex one, is the one which comes as a transformation on an existing pratyaya. So if you have a word called Varahi, which is generated using the original word called Varaha and a stri pratyaya called Iya, and then when you want to convert Varahi into feminine form, it is the Iya pratyaya that gets converted to Shang. So you don't add Shang on the top of Varaha plus Iya. It is the Iya pratyaya that gets converted to Shang and a chap is added on the top. So just like the way Shpa always gets another pratyaya called Nish, Shang gets a pratyaya called chap. Now you'll actually understand why I'm again and again stressing that this is not something that is to be taken lightly. Similarly, Kumuda Gandha plus Aya becomes Kaumuda Gandha. And when you want to create a feminine form of that, Kaumuda Gandha, the feminine version of Kaumuda Gandha, it is the Aya Pratyaya on the Kumuda Gandha which gets converted to Shanga. So it becomes Kumuda Gandha plus Shanga. And then a chop comes on the top of it to form Kaumuda Gandhya. So this way, the Shanga Pratyaya, it comes as a replacement of an existing Tadhita Pratyaya rather than a new Pratyaya altogether. So this is where we complete today's class. As I mentioned, the Neep Pratyaya is the most important Pratyaya and we spend significant amount of time on it. All the other Pratyayas are being discussed in short details. Tap and Neep are the two most commonly used Pratyayas. Other Pratyayas are very rare. Shva and Shang, they are like the worst pratyaya is the most difficult, just created by Maharshi to justify certain prayogas. Here is the homework. I don't know how many of you are doing, how many of you are not doing, and so on. But I was supposed to give the homework, so I'm giving it completely up to you. So Pitru, Matru, Jagat, why you don't get a stri pratyaya for these words? Or which words get a P as a stri pratyaya? Which pratyaya to be added after Shang? So 1, 1, 2, 2 lines answer. And then this question 2, whether or not you do it in writing, at least do it verbally because it is a very important question. How is the nakara inserted in the Shatru Pratyaya case? All the cases you need to memorize. And what kind of pratipadikas get a Neep Pratyaya? So that is also the two most important parts of today's class that both of you need to really remember. So this completes the 6th session of our course and we have completed the Stri Pratyaya. Now we are going to take a break for till the end of the year. We will meet next year. The timetable is already given to you. If not, I will ask the organizers to send it again. I plan to take 4 more sessions, 2 on the Krut Pratyaya, 2 on the Tadhita Pratyaya. Unlike the sessions so far, those are going to be complete overviews because there are 140 Krut Pratyayas. So remember, if for 10 stri pratyayas I talked for 2 hours, for 140 krut pratyayas, how much I'll have to talk? And I don't have more than 4 hours, just 2 classes, 4 hours. So it is going to be an extremely high level overview. I'm not going to talk more than about 80% of these pratyayas. It's just going to be a running commentary. And then the next 2 classes for the tadhita pratyayas, which is 280 pratyayas. So 280 tadhita pratyayas, I'll again try to somehow give an overview in 2 classes. Those of you who are interested, I have a full 140 or 120 classes series of tadhita pratyayas and krut pratyayas, both available on YouTube from the website, you should be able to. So, I mean, if you want to learn, there is enough material on the website that will keep you busy for years together. So if you go to, for example, courses, there will be online courses over here. There is a separate course on the Krudanta Prakaranam. There is a separate course on the Taddhita Prakaranam. Those of you are interested can take it. But it is Ashtadhyayi Sutras, so I'm not expecting you all. But that's the depth of those pratyayas. But we'll take them in brief in two classes. There are a few questions over here out of context, but would you have a course on the Anubandhas and their usage by Panini? I don't have a course at this moment. We will think of something, but not, I don't have anything at the moment. And please share the videos of all these classes in the break. I talk with the organizers and they can, take a call on this. So let's conclude. I wish everybody, we are going to meet in the new year now. So I wish everybody a very happy, healthy, prosperous, and most important, productive new year. Because I mean, for me, unless the new features or new stuff gets added on the website, I don't call it productive. So in the same way, each of you would have some kind of goals, dreams. So let's have a big productive new year. And let's meet again in the second week of January. We will have two classes on Krudanta and we'll have two classes on Taddhita Prakaranam. So let us conclude. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaः, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. धन्यवादाः. अग्रिमवर्षे पुनर्मिलामः.